Hello ladies and gentlemen, your dear old Uncle Otter back once again covered head to toe in Vaseline and straight up sliding up to you with a brand new build. I decided to take the core concept of my Calidor's Tempest Spellbinder and turn it into a pure Aether auto-attacking machine. The build turned out exceptionally well, so I wanted to take a moment to show it off. If you're new to the channel and you like Grim Dawn, consider subscribing, as I'm putting out these videos like clockwork and streaming 4 times a week. If you don't, then the terrorists win. All of them. Every last terrorist. This build abuses an age-old Spellbinder technique that allows the user to juggle Mirror and Mark of Torment back and forth for nearly infinite invincibility, or close to it. The Spellbinder is generally a low mobility archetype, but this build gets around it by pairing our Relic's cooldown reduction proc with our movement glyph. We also lack in many of the traditional forms of tankiness like armor, health, defensive ability, and circuit breakers, meaning outside of Mark of Torment and Mirror, we're rather fragile, so we need to be careful. The first thing you should do is grab a set of Krieg's battle armor. Since it is a farmable item set, it's fairly easy to acquire and is by far the strongest Aether damage set available to us, giving us a slew of flat Aether damage, heavy armor, and physical resistance. Up next, we need to use the Mage Lord ring set combined with the legendary scepter, the Decree of Eldritch, to convert 100% of our elemental damage to Aether damage. The reason that this is so strong is because we have a ton of different sources of elemental damage that really add up, like the flat elemental damage on Skandras and Soul Harvest, the cold damage on our weapon pool skill Reaping Strike, or the lightning damage on Spear of the Heavens and Widow, and the fire damage from Phoenix. We also need the legendary relic Belgothian's Carnage, which will enable dual wielding as well as reduce our active cooldowns by 1 second every 4.5 seconds, letting us daisy chain our Mark of Torment and Mirror for massive damage reduction. Finally, we need the rare scepter, the Heart of Theoden Marcel, which will give us the auto attack replacer Flesh Warp Strikes. It's very important that we find one that has a decent amount of attack speed on it, as that is our strongest DPS stat, and it's lacking in the rest of the build, so look for an of Alacrity suffix or something similar. When it comes to devotions, I think there are 2 equally viable paths to take. However, the core devotions that I think every build must have are Widow, for the Aether resistance reduction proc, and Spear of the Heavens, for the strong Aether damage scaling nodes and the fantastic proc that doesn't require an offensive ability to trigger. However, the endgame devotions depend on whether you want the focus of your build to lean for a faster, more aggressive approach, or a much safer, tankier, more methodical approach. For this build, I went for a rather interesting choice which suited my aggressive playstyle perfectly, which is the Korvac Devotion. It's got a ton of great nodes, including 5% offensive ability and 8% crit damage, but the proc itself is incredibly strong. 6 meteors will surround you, dealing weapon damage and shredding both offensive and defensive ability. Each meteor can hit a target multiple times, so it really puts in work against enemies with larger hitboxes. It's also got a 1.5 second internal cooldown, so it's going to be proccing constantly. The more defensive path goes for an incredibly strong Aeon's Hourglass. This is a great pick for us, since it fits almost entirely within the devotion requirements for Spear of the Heaven. The active proc will completely remove the window of time where we have neither Mark of Torment or Mirror active, giving us nigh-on invincibility. In the Arcanist tree, we're going to go all the way to the end for Reckless Power, an insanely strong buff for our DPS by giving us attack speed, and flat and scaling Aether damage. Other strong nodes are of course Fabric of Reality for the flat and scaling Aether damage, Maven's Sphere of Protection, which will increase our bottom line for tankiness by a hefty amount, Inner Focus to vault our offensive ability to absurd levels, and Mirror at a soft cap to maximize its cooldown efficiency. Over in the Necromancer tree, we go for a full 40 points to grab the Blood Boil node, which will shred offensive ability whenever we siphon souls. Soul Harvest is incredibly strong, as we will convert all of that flat cold damage and most of that flat vitality damage to Aether damage. Mark of Torment needs to at least be at 10 points to maximize the cooldown efficiency and its duration. Overcap both Spectral Binding and Spectral Wrath for the insanely efficient stat allocation and the resistance reduction. Soft cap Ill Omen for the enemy damage reduction, and finally get both weapon pool skills to at least rank 9 so they can proc as often as possible. As always, the key to playing this build right is using your Mirror and Mark of Torment effectively. Between the Belgothian Relic, any of the Guild Arcanum suffixes, and the Hourglass Devotion if you chose that route, you should be able to have near constant uptime between the two, mitigating most, if not all of the damage you would take. After you get that down, bosses and super bosses should be putty in your hand. Anyways gang, that's all for this build guide. If you like what you saw, consider stopping by a live stream at twitch.tv/armoredotter, or even here on YouTube from time to time. If you want to stay up to date on all my garbage, consider joining the Discord in the description. As always, my name's Armored Otter, and this has been a tutorial for making homemade explosives. I mean, a video game video about video games.